Stop buying expensive Ironite just because your lawn isn't as dark green as you want. A much simpler iron source may already be available as a low-cost powder, and when iron is the missing piece, it can deepen turf color without pushing the excessive leaf growth that too much nitrogen can cause. Penn State Extension notes that iron applications can produce darker green turf even when tissue iron is already adequate. But here's the catch. Pale grass doesn't always mean it needs iron. In this video, we'll show you when this $2 powder makes sense, when it doesn't, and how to avoid turning green up into lawn damage. A pale lawn doesn't always have one simple cause. Before reaching for an iron product, look at the pattern across the grass. If the entire lawn is gradually losing its green color, the issue may be related to nitrogen. When yellowing appears between the veins while the veins remain greener, iron availability becomes a more likely possibility. Soil conditions can complicate that picture. Iron may be present in the ground, but still unavailable to the plant in a form it can use. Higher soil pH is one factor that can reduce iron availability, which means adding more iron isn't always the same as making more iron available to the grass. There are other clues worth checking. A lawn under heat or drought stress can lose color because the plant is struggling with its growing conditions, not because one nutrient is missing. Heavy shade can also limit turf performance, while compacted soil can restrict the root environment. In those cases, a darker colored treatment may only hide the symptom for a short time. This is why color alone isn't a reliable diagnosis. A quick soil test can provide much better information about nutrient levels and soil conditions before you start applying products. It can help separate a genuine nutrient problem from a lawn that needs better growing conditions. Iron has a specific job in the plant, and when it's available, an application can improve turf color. But that doesn't mean every pale lawn needs an iron treatment. Once you know the difference between a color problem and a nutrient problem, the inexpensive powder in this video becomes much easier to understand and much harder to misuse. The inexpensive powder we're talking about is ferrous sulfate, also called iron sulfate. It supplies iron in a form that can be useful for turf when iron availability is part of the color problem. Unlike a complete lawn fertilizer, its main purpose here is to provide iron rather than deliver a full package of nutrients. That difference matters. If your grass already has enough nitrogen and the problem is related to iron availability, adding more nitrogen may push extra leaf growth without giving you the color change you're looking for. An iron source can take a different path by supplying a nutrient involved in the plant's ability to maintain healthy green tissue. Ferrous sulfate isn't the only iron option. Chelated iron products are another approach, and their performance can vary with soil conditions and application method. The important point is not that one form is always better. It's that the product needs to match the actual problem you're trying to correct. There's also a reason this inexpensive option can be appealing. You don't necessarily need a premium lawn product just to obtain iron. A basic iron sulfate product can provide the nutrient directly, provided it is labeled for the intended use and applied according to its directions. The price of the bag, however, doesn't tell you how much usable iron you're actually getting. Check the label before comparing products. Two powders can have very different concentrations, application rates, and instructions. That's why copying a scoop measurement from one product to another can be misleading. The correct amount depends on the specific formulation. And don't expect iron to behave like a traditional fertilizer that simply forces the lawn to grow faster. The main attraction is often color. Iron applications can deepen turf color, but the response depends on the grass, soil conditions, weather, and how much usable iron is already available. A lawn with a completely different underlying problem may show little improvement. That brings us to the most important part of using a cheap iron source. The powder itself isn't the shortcut. The correct rate is. Too little may produce little visible change. Too much can create dark, unnatural discoloration and may injure the turf. So before you spread it across the lawn, the next step is learning how to apply the product accurately instead of guessing with a handful or scoop. The safest way to apply iron is to stop thinking in terms of scoops and start thinking in terms of the product label. Ferrous sulfate products can differ in concentration, formulation, and recommended application rate, so there isn't one universal amount that works for every powder. Begin by checking the percentage of iron listed on the package. That number tells you more than the size of the bag or the price. A product with a different concentration may require a completely different application rate, which is why copying measurements from another product can lead to over-application. For granular products, spreader calibration matters. If your spreader releases too much material, the lawn can receive far more iron than intended. Test the spreader according to the manufacturer's instructions and use the rate specified for your particular product and turf. Don't estimate the amount by eye just because the powder looks harmless. Application conditions matter too. Avoid treating stressed turf simply because the color looks disappointing. Heat, drought, and other stresses can change how grass responds to treatments. Follow the product's directions for suitable weather, watering, and application conditions rather than creating your own schedule. There's another issue that has nothing to do with grass color: staining. Iron products can leave noticeable stains on concrete, sidewalks, driveways, and other hard surfaces. Keep granules where they belong and clean accidental spills according to the product instructions. Most importantly, resist the urge to add more when the lawn doesn't change immediately. A darker color can take time to develop, and the response depends on the turf and growing conditions. Increasing the rate before you can evaluate the first application simply raises the risk of injury. Penn State Extension notes that excessive iron can cause very dark discoloration and, at higher rates, turf damage. The same principle applies to repeat applications. Give the first treatment enough time to show its effect, then evaluate the lawn before deciding whether another application is actually justified. A cheap powder only stays cheap when you use exactly what the lawn needs. And that leads to the bigger question: when does iron actually make a difference? And when are you trying to solve the wrong problem? Iron makes the most sense when the lawn has a color problem that actually responds to additional iron. If the grass is pale because usable iron is limited, an iron application can improve its appearance without making nitrogen the answer to every problem. The harder part is recognizing when iron isn't the missing piece. Imagine a lawn that has become uniformly pale because it needs nitrogen. Adding iron may deepen the color somewhat, but it doesn't replace the nitrogen the grass requires. The same applies when heat, drought, shade, poor drainage, or other growing conditions are limiting the turf. A nutrient treatment can't remove those underlying stresses. Soil pH can complicate things further. Iron may be present in the soil but less available to plants under certain conditions, including higher pH soils. In that situation, repeatedly adding more iron isn't necessarily the smartest response. Understanding why the grass cannot access the nutrient can be more useful than simply increasing the amount you apply. The pattern across the lawn can provide another clue. If one area looks noticeably different from another, compare sunlight, moisture, soil condition, and turf density before assuming the darker or lighter color is caused by iron. A lawn rarely changes for just one reason. This is where soil testing becomes valuable. Instead of choosing a product based only on appearance, testing can help identify nutrient levels and soil conditions that may be contributing to poor turf performance. There are also times when the best iron application is no application at all. If the grass is already receiving adequate iron and the real limitation is elsewhere, adding more can waste money and potentially create discoloration or injury when excessive amounts are used. Penn State Extension specifically notes that excessive iron can produce very dark turf and, at higher rates, damage the grass. The goal isn't to make every pale lawn darker at any cost. It's to identify what the grass is missing before you add anything. Once that diagnosis is right, avoiding a few common application mistakes becomes the easiest way to save both product and money. One common mistake is treating the lawn before identifying the reason for its color. If the grass is pale because of nitrogen, drought, shade, or another growing problem, adding iron may give you little of the result you're expecting. The product can't compensate for a diagnosis that was wrong from the beginning. Another problem is assuming every iron powder is interchangeable. Check the label for the actual iron concentration and application instructions. Two products can contain different amounts of iron, so using the same scoop measurement for both can lead to an excessive application. Spreader settings create another opportunity for error. A setting that worked for one product isn't automatically correct for another. If you're applying granular iron, calibrate the spreader according to the product instructions instead of guessing from appearance. Then there's the urge to speed things up. If the lawn doesn't become darker as quickly as you hoped, adding another dose immediately can create more risk without giving the first application enough time to show its effect. Excessive iron can cause very dark discoloration and, at higher rates, turf injury. Don't confuse color with overall lawn health either. A darker lawn isn't automatically a healthier lawn. If the turf is suffering from drought, compaction, poor drainage, or another environmental stress, repeatedly adding iron treats the appearance rather than the condition that is limiting growth. Hard surfaces are easy to overlook. Iron products can stain concrete and other surfaces, so keep the application where it belongs and deal with accidental spills according to the product directions. Finally, don't stack different iron treatments simply because each one promises greener grass. Give an application time to work, evaluate the response, and only continue if the product directions and the lawn's conditions support another treatment. The cheapest iron strategy is rarely the one that uses the smallest amount of product. It's the one that avoids unnecessary applications in the first place. And once the color is where you want it, the bigger challenge is keeping the lawn healthy enough that you don't have to keep chasing that color with another bag. A dark green lawn is easier to maintain when color is treated as one part of turf health, not the entire goal. Iron can be useful when the grass responds to it, but long-term results depend on the growing conditions around the plant. Start with the basics. Give the grass enough sunlight for its species, mow at an appropriate height, and adjust watering to the lawn's actual needs. These decisions affect how well the turf grows and competes with stress. If one section repeatedly struggles, look for a reason before reaching for another product. Soil deserves attention too. A soil test can help reveal whether nutrients or soil conditions may be limiting the lawn. If the test points toward a different deficiency, correcting that issue is more useful than repeatedly applying iron simply because the grass looks pale. The same principle applies to fertilizer. Iron is not a replacement for the nutrients required for normal turf growth. If nitrogen is actually limiting the lawn, the answer is a properly planned fertilizer program rather than an endless cycle of iron applications. On the other hand, if iron availability is the issue, a suitable iron product can be a targeted part of the plan. Watch the lawn after each treatment. Instead of chasing the darkest possible shade of green, look for consistent color, healthy growth, and good coverage. If the grass responds well to an iron application, there's no reason to keep adding more just to make it even darker. And remember that different parts of the same yard can behave differently. One area may receive full sun while another sits under shade. One may drain quickly while another stays wet. Those differences can explain why a single treatment doesn't produce the same result everywhere. That changes how you should think about the $2 powder. It's not a permanent substitute for lawn care, and it doesn't need to be. Used when iron is actually appropriate, ferrous sulfate can be a straightforward way to supply iron without automatically buying a premium color-focused product. When iron isn't the limiting factor, your money and effort are better spent elsewhere. The real trick isn't finding a powder that makes grass green. It's knowing why the grass isn't green enough in the first place. Once you make that distinction, you can use iron as a tool instead of turning it into another product you feel you have to buy every season. A darker lawn doesn't always need a more expensive product. When iron is the missing piece, a simple iron source can help improve color, but knowing when to use it matters most. Watch the next video to learn which common lawn care mistake can quietly undo all that green up work.